River Hauntings. It is September 26th, 2019. It is at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time in beautiful Vero Beach, Florida and Orlando, Florida. And I'm here with my partner in crime, Mr. Chris Huff, coming to us direct from Durham, England, where it's midnight. Chris, say hi to everybody.
It is midnight. It is always midnight, but I'm prepared. We have a pint of very strong coffee.
Speaking of a sort of a pint, tonight's beer, hope you're watching, Ike. Isla Morada beer, brewed right next door in Fort Pierce, Florida. This is the beer of the night. Just wanted to share that with everybody. I've already been harassed by my English friend that this is not really beer as far as you're concerned, right?
It's not beer. What's the strength of it?
It's about almost 5.2%.
That's pretty good.
It's a good beer. This is a good beer. Isla Morada Beer Company in Fort Pierce, Florida. Great beer. I enjoy it. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. And I'm waiting to see what you're going to counter with me next time.
Oh, well, I'll try something. I'll find something. I'll find something interesting.
Okay, very good. Well, real quick, give our usual shout-outs. Hi to some friends of ours. As always, my dear friend Scotty Burns, who runs War Party Paranormal down there in West Palm Beach, Florida. Hello to Scotty and all the gang down there. She's got a great operation. Want to say hi to my good friend Ike Enzi at IDK Paranormal, fellow law enforcement officer, who's done some really interesting videos, and I really recommend you go see him on YouTube because he talks about first responders and the paranormal and things that he's encountered, and he does a great show. So go watch he and his daughter on IDK Paranormal here on YouTube. Want to say hi to Damien Freddy, our mutual friend in York in the Shambles, one of the best storytellers you're going to find in that part of England, and our friends at the Driftwood Inn in Fort Vero Beach. Zach and Joe, and all my friends at the Marsh Landing Restaurant in Fellsmere, Florida. And I know I'm missing somebody, but as always, folks, write in with stuff that you got going so we can say hi to you. ghostguy59@gmail.com is how to get a hold of me. Send me stuff that you guys have going, maybe with your groups or teams, especially with the holidays coming up. And let me announce it for you. Okay, so hi to all my good friends out there, as well as the folks I just mentioned, Ike and all of them. So anyway, who you got to say hi to today, dear friend?
Well, we've got Paul up in Scotland, who
Hey,
I'm sure is listening in. And Deborah has just had eye surgery, so I hope she's sitting down in a chair and taking things nice and easy and listening in. And
she's down my neck of the woods too, right? Orlando, Florida.
She's just up from Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping everything's gone well. She'll find out tomorrow.
Good deal. I hope you're feeling better, Deborah, and thanks always for listening, and anybody else that's out there listening also. Just to let you know, Indian River Hauntings, we've got some cool stuff going on. Get to our website at www.indianriverhauntings.com for our historical ghost tours, but also we're going to be in Arcadia, Florida for dinner and a ghost hunt. We'll be at the Sexton Tripson property here in Indian River County on the 19th of October, and the 26th we'll be out for dinner and a ghost hunt. I'll get it out in Fellsmere, Florida, and Arcadia is Saturday the 5th of October. So lots of things happening. If you want to learn more about the paranormal and you know our vision, Chris and I share this the right way, the proper way, the respectful way, and the way that we're going to trying to find out the answers to what this question of all time is, what is on the other side. So check out our website and our Facebook and stuff. So with that, my dear friend, we got to go to part 2 on a pretty popular topic we had last week.
It seems to have gone down very, very well. So there'll be more of these coming.
Yeah.
There's so much that can be talked about. There is so much.
And for those of us that may have missed last week, we're talking. Chris is an expert. He's probably, in my opinion,
no such things as experts.
Yeah, I know. Chris is so blasted humble, but he is, in my opinion, my humble opinion, the utmost expert on haunted airfields in the United Kingdom from World War II. And we spent last week talking about a number of the Royal Air Force, mostly Bomber Command airfields. My father flew with Bomber Command. He was an American, but he went over to England during the Second World War and is in Bomber Command, and that's kind of how one of the ways that Chris and I got together. But today we're going to be talking about the Americans that flew out of English bases, and you've compiled some pretty interesting information on that, I think, right?
Well, just a few bits that I've printed off just to make sure that I can remember what I'm talking about.
Well, last week you and I were talking about the palatable feeling of dread, doom, darkness that during the time, for lack of a better term, haunted RAF bomber command fields in a dress almost an opposite of what you saw in the fighter airfields, which was a
Yeah,
little bit.
it is very different. The fighter airfields have just got a lighter feeling. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's still places on fighter airfields where it feels wrong, where someone's crashed or you've got someone wandering around. But on bomber airfields, the atmosphere is very different, and it's the same on the USAF bomber airfields. It's
Mhm.
completely the same. When you've got 10, 12 aircraft going off at a certain time, and then you're just waiting to see how many are actually coming back.
Mhm.
Not only did it take a toll on the crews, but it took a real toll on the staff in the tower,
Mhm.
waiting to see are all these boys coming back. And let's face it, they were boys,
Oh
you know,
my God,
18 to
19.
25,
Oh,
yeah, really young.
let me toss this out real quick, folks. You want to see a movie from the American side, and maybe you can toss in a British movie. See 12 O'clock High with Gregory Peck.
It's a good
I
film.
mean, yeah, good film. I use it as a leadership film. In when I was running the police academy, I taught leadership classes. I used that film to in some of my leadership classes. You can't ever get that feeling on film. I mean, unless you're there, you could never adequately describe it. But 12 O'clock High gets as close as a movie can, I think, to describing the pressure, the depression, all the things that these guys felt, fighting that war, a mile
I
above the
I
German.
I don't think I'd have the guts to do it. I just don't think I'd have the guts to do it. I'm so in awe of these guys who actually went up in these string bag planes
Hmm.
and flew thousands of miles over to Germany, taking on flak and enemy fighters and everything, and coming back and knowing that they've got a 50% chance of actually coming back.
Hmm. Yeah.
Terrible. Yeah.
Now, the Brits, did they have a number of missions? I mean, I know the Americans. I think it was 25 they flew, and they got to rotate out. Did the English Airmen and Bomber Command have the same uh, rotation schedule?
Yes and no. Yes and no. 30 ops, and then you were rested for a while, and then
Hmm.
it was called a tour. So you
Right.
did a tour, then you were rested for a while, then you did another tour. There was no going home and X, Y, and Z after a tour.
Hmm.
So our crews just kept going, and that's the same for the Aussies and the
Yeah.
Canadians and all the colonials. All our allies who came in and helped us, they were just going again, and the Poles, the Czechs, the
Hmm.
French.
Hmm.
You know, it was desperate. It was completely desperate.
And
So
and just that raw emotion, and even the American crews, even though a lot of them went home, a lot of them came back too. Just that raw emotion from all the energy from that had to leave an imprint on the land.
what I do find is that lots of crews come back. Now, even the ones who survived, they tend to come back to the airfield after they pass because that was a really good time for them. There was
Hmm.
this comradeship. There was this little family of these what in American circumstances 10 men of a bomber crew, and they were really tight.
Hmm.
They were brothers really, and they come back to the airfields and they pass through the airfield and they go and look at this and look at that and have they're 19 again.
Yeah. Well, you told me a story, and I'm pretty sure it was on the air. I don't think you told it to me when we were just chatting, but it was an older gentleman who was a crewman on I don't remember what type of aircraft, but he was a British crewman, and he came back to a pub,
That's right.
And
It's the Hollybush, and
yeah.
it's down in the Midlands,
Hmm.
um, and it was a Wellington, and it
Okay.
crashed on training
That's what my
mission.
dad flew in.
Uh, he was the rear gunner, and he got ejected out as the aircraft crashed,
Hmm.
and all the others were killed. And they'd arranged to meet up later on.
Well, they were still alive.
As
They came
as
up with an agreement.
yeah, they'd all made this agreement that if anything happened with them, they'll meet up in 10 years' time at a certain place, which is their local watering hole. The accounts in Jack Curry's Echo is in the Air. So if you ever get a chance to read that book, go down the library or anything and go and have a read of it.
Mhm. Yeah, that was fascinating. So many stories. So most of Bomber Command was in the north, if memory serves. Fighter Command. I
No,
think.
no, 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 no.
Okay, straighten me out.
It's
Straighten me out.
doesn't quite work that way. Honestly, it doesn't quite. Not quite. You've also got Bomber Command. Also had the Pathfinder Force, which is not Pathfinders in American terms, who are ground forces. These went in and laid marker flares for the bombers to bomb on.
Hmm.
So you're saying about a movie to typify what you're talking about, and you've got 12 o'clock high. Go and see Appointment in London.
Appointment in London. Okay.
Appointment in London. It's a good film, and it's shows RAF Pathfinders. Uh, I'm not going to if I start telling you about the film, it's going to ruin it.
Okay.
It's that simple, but it's Bomber Command. It's worth a watch.
Okay.
So you've down in the south, yes, you get an awful lot of in the southeast of England, the closest part to the continent, you get a lot of fighter bases.
Hmm.
As you come up to Essex, just above the Thames, Essex and Norfolk and Suffolk, you got the American bases. But before they were American bases, they were number two group, which were light bombers.
Okay. Like
Then,
battles and things like that.
oh god, they're awful things. Yeah, Blenheims,
Okay.
Beauforts, things like this, the light bombers,
Hmm.
which then evolved into the Beaufighters and the Mosquitoes, which
Hmm.
were much better. The losses on number two group were horrendous because they were flying during the day in light bombers. They were just getting shot out of the sky.
Hamptons. I'm thinking of a Hampton now.
Hamptons were proper bombers.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay, they were very small, but they were proper bombers.
Hmm.
So they're further north. Once you actually hit Nottinghamshire, Lincolnshire, Yorkshire, then you start getting the heavy bombers, which in the beginning of the war was Whitleys. They were awful. Um, uh, Wellingtons, which were probably the best bomber that we had at the beginning of the war,
Hmm.
and Hamptons, which were very small. I mean, there's I think Scampton, when Scampton's got about our worst losses with about 250 something aircraft lost crews,
Mm.
of which 150 something were Hamptons.
Oh dear God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
150 crew. Okay, there were four in the crew of a Hampton, but it's still
Right.
150 crews. Not
Yeah.
all killed. I mean, some taken prisoner, some crashed and got
Injured.
back, and
Yeah.
some. These are aircraft lost. So not all crews.
Timing's good as an airplane's flying over me right now. That's good timing.
Synchronicity, synchronicity.
Synchronicity. So okay. So with heavy bombers, we talked a lot about them last week. Where was the American forces? We started coming over there 42 to start putting it together. Our bombing efforts really started in earnest in about 43. Where were most of those bases based? How many of those have you had a chance to take a look at, or you have information on as far as residual emotions, shall we say?
Now, which question do you want answered?
Okay, all right. You refer to the Army Air Corps, United States Army Air Force. Your USAF is how you normally uh, describe it. How many bases handled our forces, our air crews?
Lots. Lots. 70, 80,
Okay.
up even more. I mean, as the war progressed, more airfields were turned over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. To start with, I think there were 30, 40 airfields that were allocated, and that just kept going up and up and up. And then they started making um, two runway airfields out in the West Country where crews were coming in, excuse me, training up and then
Mhm.
moving on.
Okay.
And by 1944, you were getting what was called, instead of squadrons or bomb groups or whatever, fighter groups as you had whole airfields. So the airfield was not the location of the airfield, but it was number whatever airfield, and the whole organization moved. So
Okay.
that when they started off somewhere in the southwest, and then they'd move to the southeast, and then eventually they'd move over to France. But it's the whole organization moves in one. So you've got, say, if it's a fighter group, you've got the fighter aircraft, all the ancillary personnel, and they all move in one. So
Mhm.
the whole thing just goes bang, taken over. Everything's all set up in one.
These airfields, how many have you had? Have you had an opportunity to go to any of the American airfields?
I can't actually give you a figure because all of a sudden my memory goes, oh yes, but what about so and so and so and so? Because I've also done that one. Maybe 20.
Okay.
Maybe 20.
Are they as active paranormally? Is that a word? Are they as paranormally active as the British bomber bases?
Yeah, I'd say so. I don't think there's an airfield which isn't haunted. I'd say that.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I'd say it's very similar, very similar. The American airfields have got a slightly odder feel. Um, I can't put my finger on it. It's sort of like how I imagine a baseball field feels. Um, it's sort
Interesting.
of it whereas the Bomber Command airfields are a little bit more staid. I think American airfields were far more laxer and probably better atmosphere on them.
Hmm.
So you get different stuff taking place. I think you get a lot more oddballs on American airfields, who are
Oddballs.
oddballs who are just doing their own damn thing to get through the war. Sergeants sort of siphoning off petrol and selling it down the whatever, and
Are you
all sorts of
suggesting
things
that
going on.
you suggesting there was a black market going on during the war,
No, I
Mr.
wouldn't suggest
Huff?
such a thing. No, 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 I'd be shot, wouldn't I? But but yeah, but you know what I mean.
Hmm.
I think it was looser.
Okay.
Um, you bomber crews were by the time the Americans got here, the British had been taking, or British. When I say British, I mean
The
allies.
Commonwealth. Yeah.
Yeah, just to try and separate it from USAF, who's also allies, but we're talking at different things here tonight.
Mhm.
I think it was we literally had the shit knocked out of us by the time the Americans came over, and let's face it, we were pretty much getting down onto our knees, and we got the boost in. But Americans came in and they're fresh. They haven't had the bombing. They've not been bombed back to the Stone Age like we had over here.
Mhm.
Um, they've not seen a lot of crews lost. So by the time the Americans come in, we've really experienced what's going on. And the Americans seem to have this much lighter atmosphere to it. Even on the bomber airfields, it's slightly lighter.
Mhm.
Once you get later, then it gets darker. I mean, there are places, Bassingbourn, down in Hertfordshire. I think it's Hertford. It might be Hertfordshire,
Mhm.
Cambridgeshire. No, it's Cambridgeshire, isn't it? Bassingbourn, which is just up from London, for where you are, which is a bomber base, B-17s. Um, referring to my notes here, so do excuse me. In total, flying 340 missions. That's not sorties. That's sortie is an aircraft. A mission is the bomb group.
Right.
340 missions, lost 197 B-17s.
And they usually crew about 11.
The 10s, 11s, yeah.
Yeah.
But Bassingbourn was in operation from late 1942, one of the
Mhm.
earliest going. Um, this was the I can't remember which. It was the 91st bomb group. The
Mhm.
91st had the highest losses in the American thing. Bassingbourn is very haunted.
What sort of experiences have happened there? You had a chance to investigate it yourself?
Unfortunately, no. Um, Bassingbourn up till recently was It was it was RAF, then turned over to the army as an
Hmm.
army base, as quite a lot of these places do. I think the army have moved out now. I'm not absolutely sure. The control tower is still there,
Hmm.
and it hosts a museum. But every time that I've been past it, it's been closed
Okay.
for lack of staff, or there's something wrong with the building, or X, Y, and Z. It's always been closed.
Hmm.
But there's so much going on there that it's unbelievable. I mean, if you talk to anyone about Bassingbourn, they always say about the Phantom B-17, which flies over.
Oh, tell me more. Tell me more, because that begs a couple of questions.
I can't really tell you much more about that, but the B-17 flies over the airfield. It's one of the most generally, where I've got here, the tale generally related is of a returning B-17 crash landing into the block. Which block I'm not sure. The watch office, perhaps, during the Second World War, and this thing seems to fly over again and again and again. But there's so much else going on. Um, one of the hauntings were going on at Bassingbourn even during the Second World War.
Really?
In there's one account from an Alan Jones, who was an American who served there during the war, who stated that he saw an airman in American style flying gear walk across to a parked B-17 on the dispersal pan and walked around the back of the aircraft. And thinking it was one of the colleagues that he knew, he followed him around and there was nobody
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
And this is even during the war, that these places were getting the reputation for being haunted.
Well, and you can imagine too. I mean, young men dying, emotions being so raw there. Yeah, I could see stuff happening there. You'd mentioned people seeing this Phantom B-17 flying over. That begs the question. I understand seeing the ghost of a human. It's the residual energy that was that person. I mean, that's the theory. How you got any thoughts on how that relates to a piece of machinery? Have you ever seen an aircraft? Have you ever seen a Phantom
No,
aircraft yourself?
no, but I've heard one.
You've heard one, yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and you know what it comes down to? It comes down to shit happens, because I've got no explanation at all. But it happens.
And it's happened time and time again. I mean, there are so many reports of, well, here, go back to ships. The Flying Dutchman's a perfect old example. People seeing aircraft, ships, cars,
Hmm.
and it sort of defies the description we give of the residuals of those that have passed coming back being ghosts. How does a piece of machinery do that? Is it, I mean, is it the emotion tied to it because of the men that crewed the aircraft? Maybe. I know
Shit,
we don't
shit,
know.
shit
Shit happens.
happens. I,
Well,
I'm a great believer in time slips.
okay.
I've
Kind of
had an
explain that for
experience of
those.
that myself.
Okay.
So
Explain a time slip for somebody that might not be familiar with that term.
now, which version of explain do you want? I mean, you can have my version or other people's versions.
Well, we're talking to you. Give us your version of a time slip.
Right. People usually see time as a straight linear line that goes from point A to point B. So you go from the
Mm-hmm.
past to the future, and
Mm-hmm.
somewhere along that line, um, somewhere along that straight line, we are at the present,
Mm-hmm.
always progressing in one direction. I don't see time as a straight line. I see time rather like a coiled loop that
Okay.
just keeps going round on itself, but it's also a coiled loop that is moving around. Now, where you get one of the coils which touches another part on that coil, you get a time slip event where the past and the present, for a moment in time, touch and interact with each other.
Okay. That reminds me of a story that I read, and it was early Second World War, I want to say. A a pilot, an RAF pilot, was flying to, and if you remember the story, help me with it because I'm going from memory now. Flying to another base, and he was flying over an abandoned World War I airfield.
Drem.
And as he flew
R-
over it, he saw activity and stuff, and
yeah,
then you know the story then.
yeah. It's RAF Drem up in Scotland.
Uh-huh.
Um, I can't remember the name of the air marshal who did it, but as he
Yes,
flew
it was
over
near.
Drem,
Yeah.
he saw yellow aircraft of a design he didn't really, of a monoplane aircraft parked on the ground. At that time, the RAF had, this was in the 1930s, um,
Okay.
the RAF had biplanes.
Hmm.
Not string bag biplanes. You know, we had Gloucester Gauntlets and things like this, and
Hmm.
Hinds and Hearts. So they were a long way on from the World War One biplane, but still had biplanes, and there was just silver because it wasn't wartime colours. It
Right.
was just silver with insignia, so all looking very pretty for displays. And as he flew over, there were these yellow aircraft parked on the um, not the
Tarmac.
runway,
Yeah.
dispersals. Yeah, the
Yeah.
dispersals. And he reported that thingy Goddard, that was it, Air Marshal Goddard. He reported this in his notes years later. When we started off the war, you had the aircraft were all the same sort of camouflage colours, and
Hmm.
then to differentiate them, they started painting the training aircraft yellow. So he actually, it's a time slip of about 10 years that as he flew over, he saw these things from the future. And the only
Oh,
way
it
to
was for the
explain,
future. Oh, okay.
oh
That's
yeah,
just
from the
the
future, not
okay.
the past,
Okay.
which made it even more interesting. But what he reported was how Drem looked 10 years in the future.
Interesting.
So I do have a question for you guys.
Okay.
So this one's from Dan. How many
Daniel.
how many phantom vehicles slash planes have you heard or experienced? Or just experienced in general?
That's for you, Chris.
If
I
you
know you.
remember, if you remember a conversation we had a couple of weeks ago where I said, as ghosts, I don't like the term ghosts, but it will
Yeah.
serve, have
Yeah.
mass,
Hmm.
as they've been known to talk to people, as they've been known to generate smells, as they've been known to seem three-dimensional, and you can't tell them from a living being until they disappear.
Hmm.
I'd say with the same with aircraft and cars and motorcycles and buses and trains. How do you know that what you're seeing is not a phantom? If you see an old car on the road,
Hmm.
how do you know that's actually there and not a phantom? It's only if it does something strange, i.e., it goes along the road and suddenly vanishes, that you're going to say that's odd. You know, we've got lots of aircraft reported in the skies all over the place, and they only get reported because people are saying, "Oh, that's a World War II aircraft," and yet we're far more familiar with seeing even 1920s cars on the roads, so nobody blinks when they see one.
So what you're saying is sometimes we may be seeing things and just taking it as being here
Taking it as
today.
real, yeah.
All right. So if you had if how often do you think you've experienced? I know we've talked about hearing the Lancaster engines you are flying
It's
over. You told
a Halifax, yeah,
was it
Halifax
Halifax?
over
I'm
a
sorry.
Canadian base. Yeah, don't
Okay.
apologise. Stop apologising. I hate that. Um, the the only other thing that actually springs to mind, because it's late in the day, and the only other thing springs to mind was something I saw when I was 6 years old,
Uh-huh.
and we were down at uh, Eastbourne or Pevensey or somewhere on the south coast. And as I looked out to sea, there was a Viking longship, and it was going down channel against the tide and against the wind, and it was going far faster than a Viking longship could ever go. And I pointed it out, and no one else in the car could see it.
And when was this?
When I was 6,
Six.
yeah,
Okay.
so about 1965, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. It's it. So it's happened a couple of times to you. I've never that I know of have experienced it myself, but I think that's something that, part of what I want to do is more research into the phenomenon. And I think that is a great place to start. Why do people see vehicles and things? I mean, the number of aircraft
You
that have
know
been
what I'm going to say, don't you?
yeah, I do, but I don't care. I'm telling you, I refuse to believe that the answer is we won't ever. I just refuse to believe it. And that's just me.
the
What
whenever, as I said, you know how long I've been doing this, and it seems like forever and ever. And every time I've come up with an answer which seems to fit all the little nooks and crannies like a jigsaw piece,
Mm.
I discover something that doesn't fit.
Oh, sounds like a police investigation. Been there,
Exactly.
done that.
You just
And
you
what
just
you do is you keep plugging.
you keep
Just
plugging away, but that's 45 years down so far and
yeah.
no hope in sight.
Well, do you feel like you've gotten any? I won't say better. That's a bad way to put it. But if do you feel like you've made any kind of progress, even though you haven't succeeded yet in the answer? Do you feel like, okay, I've at least picked up a few more yards on this battlefield?
I think I've got an understanding of what to look for,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a big start. And I've also got an understanding of what I don't understand, and
Mm-hmm.
that's it's humbling, really, that
Mm-hmm.
like any 17-year-old, you go into this and all of a sudden you've read 3 books and you know everything about it. And now after 45 years, I'm sort of thinking, truth be told, we haven't got a clue of what's going on
No, I
because
would agree. That I
it's,
would agree with you on.
you know, uh, the more you study it, the more fascinating it gets, and the more that you keep
Amen.
having to broaden what you're looking at,
Mm-hmm.
because all of a sudden you see something else has come along, and how do you explain this? I've recently heard about sightings of cat-headed people.
That's a new one.
Oh yeah, I didn't realize this. I mean, we've got dog-headed people,
And we've
dog
got
men.
lizards,
We've got lizards.
reptilians.
We've got wild men. We've got all sorts running around. Now, cat-headed has come in. I mean, I heard about cat-headed people in the mid 80s when
Where?
somebody south of London in a wood,
Mm-hmm.
when somebody that I was talking to just I was investigating his house. Actually, this is getting away from Bomber Command, etc. But I was investigating his house, and then we got talking, and he started unwinding, and he told me about an experience when him and his sister were down in a wood south of London, and this must have been just after the Second World War. So you're
Mm-hmm.
talking late 40s, and they were running around the wood, and all of a sudden they saw two cat-headed people, tall, thin, cat-headed people on 2 legs with red swirls painted on their body who were actually hunting them from 2 different directions, and the kids ran.
Mm-hmm.
That's my first introduction into odd.
Yeah,
And
that's odd.
yeah,
Well, does this kind of fit into your theory with aircraft, time slips, or dimensional issues, perhaps?
um, I can. My one experience of a time slip occurred walking back from a local pub, and no, I hadn't had an absolute spoonful of beer. I
I
had
was
two
going to say that
pints.
you know where I would go with this one
Yeah,
right away.
I had 2 pints because it was a long trek back right across country,
Mm-hmm.
and we got onto what used to be an old track, which is just now a rutted path between fields now. And we were walking along this. We passed the old barrow coming over, barrow as in burial mound.
Okay.
We passed that, walked up to the old track on the top of the Ridgeway, walking back from the Ridgeway to Kingsdown where we were going, and the air changed. And that's the only way I can put it. The air changed. My friend who was with me didn't see anything, but he actually said, "This feels odd."
Mm-hmm.
When the air changed, it was almost like it became very electric and tingly. And for me, suddenly it stopped being 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night, whatever the time was. I don't know, closing time 11. So it's probably about 12, half past 12. Um, Walking back in fairly darkness. All of a sudden, for me, it was bright daylight. And to start with, I heard a creaky, groany sound of wooden wheels on an axle coming towards me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw this cart with an old man and a boy sitting on the cart being pulled by two oxen coming towards me. They were dressed in Roman tunics,
Interesting.
just coming towards me. And as it came within about 10 feet, everything went back to normal.
Hmm.
But the difference was that change in atmosphere, which is why I think that was a time slip.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Everything was there was about this. The night went to day, and I still can't rationalize this, but the night went to day.
Well, I see this as a possible, because I want to get back to the bomber fields in a second, but I see this as maybe a point of discussion in the future. I've got a friend of mine, she's a medium down in Stewart, Mary Southworth Youngblood,
Mhm.
and she has a very interesting story, different era, but not unlike what you described. And I'd like to examine that a little bit further in the future.
Time slips. We'll mark it in for one in the future.
Okay, good. Um, Getting back to the airfields, I got a couple things I'd like to know. First of all, any stories, legends, have you ever experienced any German? I mean, the bombing over England, many German aircraft were shot down. A lot of German airmen were killed. Any stories of any of them still being in England, still being here?
Still being here, yes. The closest Second World War airfield to me is Usworth, which is Sunderland, which part of it is, well, the majority of it is under the Nissan car works.
Okay.
A little part of the accommodation area or the technical area has been set over for the Northeast Aircraft Museum.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in there, there's wreckage from I can't remember if it's a Dornier or a Heinkel, which was shot down off Newcastle or Whitley Bay in the North Sea, and parts of the wreckage have been trawled up and put into the museum. And there's 4 German aircrew which have been periodically seen in the museum around the area of the wreckage.
Now, and have you actually experienced that yourself, or?
Now, I can't say I've seen them as apparitions, but I've seen them in my mind.
Okay, and I totally understand. When they appear, are they confused? Are they
No,
wondering why? No.
no, they're just there. They're just there. They're not. I've never known them to say anything. They're just there. They've got sort of like flying helmets on, but not flying helmets that we have. Sort of like whitish or creamish caps on over the top.
Yeah, well, that was typical for German headgear for German bomber crew.
It's not the American or the British sort of flying helmet that we'd have, and they've got just brown overalls rather than any uniform or anything. It's brown overalls. There's 4 of them. One seems to come forward more than any of the others, but no, they haven't said anything or done anything. I think maybe they are lost, but I don't know. But I couldn't make any contact with them. That's the only thing I can say. Sometimes I can't make contact. I can see them, but they won't respond, and they don't seem to respond to me.
Interesting.
But doesn't mean to say they're not spirits. It doesn't mean to say that it's just a memory. It's they're just locked into a little loop that they don't escape from, and it's quite hard to break into that loop.
Now we can a lot of times almost like a film replaying itself, a tape replaying itself. Is that what you're describing?
No.
No. Okay.
No. We get back to time again. And what seems to happen is their time is progressing normally, but that time has spun off. So they get a single version of this. It's just their time going on, but we can see this many, 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 many times. That's got you boggling, hasn't it?
Well, I'm trying. It's almost like what we would consider what I call a residual thing. But what you're saying is each time they appear, it's fresh and new to them. even though we may see it a dozen times. Have I got that right?
It's literally that it's happening to them once,
Okay.
but to us, it's happening many times.
But each time it happened, each time they appear, it's like it's just happening to them the first time.
They don't seem to, because of what's happening to them, and they've spun off of their little time wheel
Okay.
or time swirl, as I sort of see it. They're not aware of what's happening when we see them.
Gotcha.
So I do have a question for you guys.
Yes, sir.
It's from Ike. So he says many cultures have and still use psychedelics to contact the spirit world. What's your thoughts on that?
Ah, a little off the beaten track there, but Ike, my good friend out in New Mexico, what do you think there, Professor Huff?
The magic mushrooms, as Dan would
Uh,
say.
yes, I'm very, 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 very interested. Um, I have never, I will state this immediately, I have never taken an illegal substance in my life. I'm even loath to take painkillers. It interferes with my mediumship, and sometimes it sends me off the other. I can't have morphine, for example. It sends me completely up the wall.
And with the way you've been injured, you've had to experience that a few
I've
times.
had morphine before in the past when I've broken my leg, etc. I was seeing things jumping in the corner of rooms. Very, very, very weird things, sort of like rabbits and big rabbits which morphed into spiders, and it was very weird.
Oh man.
Oh yeah, no, it was quite horrible. I've I have many conversations with someone who took a lot of LSD when he was younger, and his experiences tally to a great degree with what I see being a medium. So it seems to be a way that you can access other things without having this latent talent.
Well, look at what, and now we're starting to get far afield of where we're going, but that's okay.
Really are.
This is an interesting topic because you go back to the work of the CIA and other international intelligence agencies, MK Ultra, a lot of that had to do with the testing of the use of those types of drugs to create somebody who could enhance their remote viewing skills or to make contact to places that a person in their normal state couldn't. So there's a lot of history to that, and certainly Ike discusses the cultures out in the Southwest. I'm sure that dealt with that, and I'm sure you'll see it in other cultures around the world. So it is your belief that that can enhance the ability to reach the other side, then?
The psychedelics, yes. I don't think so much with the morphines and the cocaines, etc.
Right,
But
right.
definitely, I've heard great things about peyotes and magic mushroom. My friend was saying that the best experiences he ever had was with the magic mushrooms, because it really was making contact with the other side.
Okay, I was going to ask you what that experience was. All kidding aside, so that's that. I find that very, very fascinating stuff. Kind of as a sidebar to that, I think we all agree that it's pretty well scientifically proven. We use 100% of our brain, but we only know about what 20% of it is capable of. Is it possible that these types of narcotic agents maybe open up some of those areas of the brain that we still don't understand, and that's what may be the opening to the other side? Is that possible, Chris? Your thoughts there?
Once again, we open up other arguments, for want of a better word, in that I start to say define how we store memories.
Okay.
The scientists and the skeptics will say, well, it's obviously stored in your brain because that's it. Nothing else exists. I happen to believe that a lot of the stuff we store outside and we access it.
Can you explain that a little bit better?
Oh God, this is hard.
Okay.
If you think back to what they call the Akashic records, which are everything stored on another dimension, another plane of existence, and then you go out and you access it like you use a library, and then you come back and then you've got that memory.
Hmm.
I've a lot of the way that I tend to store things seems to be I have to go outside myself to access this and bring it back and then talk about it, which is why you suddenly get this lag. I'm accessing memories.
Okay.
They come back rather like opening a packet. You're opening a parcel, that
Hmm.
you get the parcel, you open the parcel, and once you've opened the parcel, the memory sort of explodes in my mind, and I've got the memory back, but it's not there immediately.
Hmm.
It's very different from instant memory, which is sort of like, you know, what's 3 times 3? 9, which is an instant memory. You've been hammered in as a kid,
Hmm.
what's your times table? This is what happened when I was at RF Tholthorpe when the aircraft flew over.
Hmm.
Go out of myself, it comes back and it opens up in my mind and I actually relive it.
That's kind of interesting because, and I am not suggesting anything here, but there are certain events that I see in on history programs that spark a very strange emotion in me. And I've often wondered, does I don't know if that's kind of what you're talking about or not, but it's almost like a
Now,
memory of sorts.
if you're going down to the realms of past lives, which is something else I want to have another
Yes,
session on one
yeah,
time.
we're gonna have another talk on
Uh,
that one. Yeah.
one of mine is the Battle of Manassas, Bull Run, and that's a
Sweet.
memory I've got of a
See,
past life.
I always knew you wanted to be a Yankee deep down. I knew it. I knew it.
It's on the Confederate side.
Whoa.
Still an American. Yes, yes,
Well,
Ryan.
yeah.
Okay, so we have another one.
Okay.
How do spirits learn if they don't have a brain?
Who asks this question?
Our friend Daniel, the man.
Dan, the man, my lead investigator. Dan, well, I don't know that they're. That's a good question. Do they learn, or do they just continue on with what the memory of their essence is?
They definitely learn. There's if you have intelligence, there's learning,
And there's
and
a
intelligence is demonstrated time and time and time again.
and it's not
It
necessarily
comes
organic.
it comes back to this argument again of, do you just see things as a um, materialistic reductionist universe, or do you see things as far bigger with very many more possibilities in it?
Yeah.
Is memory confined to a brain, and when we die, when the brain rots, is that it, or is there something beyond? If there's something beyond, it's
I
the
agree with you.
intelligence and the memory is stored somewhere else, and it continues.
But so you don't see learning as an organic mechanism of the brain. Learning is just something that.
Learn part and part. Um, you learn potty training as an organic thing. You
Hmm.
know, you learn that if you touch a fire, you get burnt. That's an organic thing. It's this lower learning, but higher learning is on a different plane. So
Okay.
once you actually start talking quantum physics, it's on a completely different plane. You're talking almost anything can happen.
Hmm.
Storing of memories outside of the body um, on I haven't got words to describe what I see. That's half the problem.
Well, you know what I'm seeing, Chris? I am seeing the fact that we've probably got 10 years worth of shows to talk about. That's what
Oh,
I'm seeing.
absolutely, yeah.
I mean, and folks, if you're out there listening, these are the areas we want to go to, and these are the things that we want to invite you to join us on and give us your thoughts and opinions. By talking and by hashing this stuff out, it's going to open doors. So these are great questions. But I want to get you back. I want to reel you in, old friend. I want to talk about we're running short on time, and I want to talk about the USAF bases in England just for a couple more minutes.
Mhm.
Which the which base do you think holds that deepest memory for crews that keep them there? I mean, Thorpe Abbotts rings a bell with me, the home of the Bloody 100th.
Well, we've got the story of the 100th, But truth be told, I have done Thorpe Abbots and I found it empty. I
Really?
didn't. Other people have said, "Oh, you know, the tower is got lots of feelings and didn't like it." I found it fairly empty. Um, Hang on,
Okay.
Bassingbourn I haven't been to. Kimbolton we've not got time for. King's Cliff. Now, King's Cliff. I've done King's Cliff, which is another USAF base, which was fighters. It also had one of the. It had number 133 Squadron, the Eagle Squadron based there for a while.
Ah, yeah.
Um,
They started flying Hurricane twos,
yeah.
and right, and
Now,
Spits.
the control tower at Kingscliff is still there.
Hmm.
Now, I found it very atmospheric. It wasn't hostile. It was just you could feel there were people around. Um, Crowding in is what I call it. They were crowding in. They were interested in what I was doing and why I was there.
Okay.
And I've actually got a video on my channel of responses from Kingscliff, and it wasn't that bad. However, there was an interesting um, report from the Army Rumour Service, which is the a forum for the army
Hmm.
or people ex-army, and I'll read it various bits about it. A chap and his missus and their dog, a collie, went to have a look at Kingscliff, the old Kingscliff control tower, and they found the farmer and said, "Is it all right if we go and have a look at the control tower?" And he said, "Yeah, but I wouldn't advise it." So, thinking, what does he know? Off they went. This guy's ex-army, not afraid of
Okay.
anything. Yeah, off they go. Once they approach the tower, his girlfriend starts to say she doesn't like this, and the dog starts acting up. So they don't go down. He tries to walk towards the tower, and then at the last minute, he just says to himself, "I don't like this. I'm not going to do it." And they walk back, not having visited the tower, and they bump into the farmer as they walk back, who says, and I quote here, "We made our way back to the farm and saw the farmer. Did you see what you wanted to see?" says he. "No, I decided I'll give it a miss," says I. At which the farmer just smiled and said, "You're not the first." And this ties in with what I say about the tower. It it's active. They're crowding around in there, and it's not like Colby Grange. Colby Grange is quite hostile at times. But it was in Kingscliff was interesting.
And that was an American base.
Kingscliff is Colby Grange isn't.
Okay.
Colby
Okay.
Colby Grange was RAF and then had Polish squadrons.
Well, this particular base, once again with the Americans, did you find them? You said they were curious as to why you were there, but
Yeah.
were curious as to why they were there? Or did you feel as though they understood why they were there and just wanted to communicate with you, maybe to get the word out? Could you tell?
Oh no, it was somewhat odd. It's like I always find there's people there who are saying, "Why are we here?" And there's people there saying, "This is mine, bugger off." And there's people saying, "Who on earth are you? And what do you want?"
Hmm.
There seems to be people there who are just experiencing what they experienced there during the war, and there's people there who are there because they seem to think they ought to be there, and people passing through, and not just RAF USAF types. There's farmers from the area in, and murder victims from 10 miles away, and
The
there's everyone
gang's
around.
all there, is what you're
The
saying.
gang's all there, and it doesn't
Okay.
have to be just USAF. One of the airfields that people often say is Rivenhall in Essex, which was another bomber base. And people say, "Oh, this feels odd," and people have had all sorts of experiences on the runways, etc. I walked around one of the Nissan huts when I was on Rivenhall. I haven't actually, I can't remember if I've actually put anything online. I've got so many online; it's unbelievable. All I felt was sadness. It wasn't a here and now sadness. It's what you'd probably call a residual feeling, but
Hmm.
just sadness. Walking around this hut, it just felt really sad. You know, like a memory of crews had been lost, and it was just very sad. And walking around, then that lingered with me for about a day, just feeling very sad and very down.
Yeah.
That was Rivenhall.
Mm.
Thorpe Abbots didn't have anything at all. Bassingbourn I haven't done. Hang on, we'll just go through what I've got. Kimbolton I haven't done, but I've been to, but I can't remember anything about it. Polebrook, which is one for you because you had
Polbrook. Yeah, I got it. My grandfather's brother's son. Yeah, so it'd be my first cousin, I guess, but he was quite a bit old. Was a B-17 pilot out of Polebrook. Got shot down, I think, 8 months before the war ended, and ended up being a POW. But he flew out of Polebrook, B-17s.
Well,
So
if when you come over, we can get down to Polebrook. Might be
okay.
worth the time. Two things always come up from the airfield. It's gone, completely gone, apart from a hangar and a few little buildings. But otherwise, it's all agriculture now. It's crops.
Mhm.
People have reported that there's a feeling to the airfield. It's not a very pleasant one, and I think that that's like a memory of this sadness,
Mhm.
which I've often got. But they're also saying that engines have been heard over the airfield, and one account has been an engine started up, coughed. You know the old radial cough.
Yeah.
Yeah, chop chop chop
Yeah.
chop chop.
Yeah.
They've
Yeah.
heard this when they
Pretty good
were at
sound
the.
effects on our part, I might add.
Oh, well, we try our best here. That was when someone was at the memorial, so it might be worth a little visit if you can get down there.
Okay. Well, I'm planning on being there next summer, so
Well,
we got lots of
shall
work
see
to do.
what we can.
We got lots of work to do.
I'll cram everyone on the motorbike, shall I?
Yeah. Hey, one question. We talk about British airfields. Any talk about airfields on the continent? Any talk about airfields in other countries that you're aware of?
There are in Germany. There are in France.
Hmm.
I believe there's some in America, and I've got two in Australia, but I haven't looked for the simple reason that I'm snowed under with what's going on in this country.
Well, what do you say we put out a challenge there to folks that may be listening, not only in your neck of the woods, but in other parts of the world that hopefully are picking up? If you are aware of airfields that were used during wartime, especially if you're in a country that was at war, do Chris and I a favor, go out and take a look and get Chris copies of your EVPs if you would, and he'll run them through his processing.
If he's got time, I'm about 10 months behind as it is.
Well, just fix it,
And
man. I
you
mean, they're
didn't
like
send
excuse.
me any EVPs.
Well, you know why? Because I actually plugged it in. What he's talking about, folks, is that we did an investigation, an event last Saturday, and I had seen an apparition of a lanky cowboy type walking across the hallway. I actually went in there, Chris, got several recordings, but for some reason it will not download on the computer, and I haven't figured out yet. So I will get them to you. But anybody out there that if you got airfields that were used during wartime or military bases, we'd love to hear about it. So this is a request, a challenge to anybody out there. And
Yeah.
what's your go ahead, I'm sorry.
One airfield I do want to mention because I was asked about it is Shipdham, which is in Norfolk.
Right.
Which was a B-24 group, sort of light bomber, two engine.
B-24 is heavy. B-24 is a heavy.
Is it?
Yeah, B-24 is a heavy.
Liberator.
Liberator. They were heavy.
Right, sorry, that's B-20.
They were our version of the Halifax.
Right. It was the 44th, the Flying Eight Balls,
who
lost 153 aircraft on missions from there. And somebody was asking what's been going on Shipdham. And a lot of things happen after dark on the old technical site. And there's been a lot of banging as though people have been repairing the aircraft. And there's also been the engine noises heard.
That seems to be pretty common, huh?
It's quite common it's probably the most common thing on American airfields, the sound of engine starting and bombers running. There's also an experience of somebody who's had lights shone on their tent while they were camping on the airfield, which weren't there when they had a look around, and of course the sound of heavy aircraft. And someone else has, when they were doing all sorts, who worked on the airfield because it's still in use for flying parts of it. And he never liked the feeling that he got when he was locking up the hangar at night. It's quite spooky. And I find the hangars are the most haunted places, even though we skew our research by everybody automatically going to the control tower. Hangars seem to be the most haunted parts, but when you consider that they dragged in the wreckage from shot up aircraft and God knows what into there, they were the most haunted. But the witness on that says the whole airfield had a distinct dark feel as soon as the light went. in that it felt like people walking around and oppressive. So I've actually got stuff on Shipdom on my YouTube site.
Yeah,
I've got
which
an account there.
which reminds me, I want everybody to hear your YouTube site because I really want to encourage you to go see some of Chris's stuff, and that is what? Go ahead and give it to him, Chris. Your website or your YouTube site.
Oh, I've no idea. I just put
Yes,
stuff on there.
Here too. Spirit Research Northeast, ladies and gentlemen. Go to his videos on YouTube, and I think you'll find some pretty darn interesting. So Spirit Research Northeast on YouTube. Go to it.
Just don't expect to see me walking around with a camera in my face, constantly spouting off, saying, "Oh, it feels this, it feels that," and laughing and giggling and running around. All you'll get is evidence. So if you want just to watch idiots walking around with a camera like you get on television, don't go to my site. You'll hate it.
Well, at any rate, I do recommend his YouTube channel, and I really appreciate all of you being with us tonight. Looks like we're about out of time.
We're about out of time. I think we're going to have to do another one on the 8th Air Force.
Yeah, I want to talk more about the bloody 100th. So we will try and schedule it again. If you're watching tonight, let us know what you thought. If you liked it, please share it. If you haven't yet, hit subscribe and hit like and hit that little bell so that you know when we have new content coming up. And there will be new content coming up. We've got some interesting little plans going, and share this with your friends because we want to get the word out. Hey Ryan, I know Dan was out there and Ike was out there. Any other folks that we need to say hello to tonight?
Just Ike, Dan, and I always forget the guy's name, but it's Commanding Judge Dredd.
Paul.
Paul. Yes, it's from Chris's. That's
all the way up in the top end of Scotland.
Man, now that's cold. I imagine that's cold up there.
And he's still got to go to Banff for me. I want some recordings from Banff, RAF Banff.
Okay, General, those are your marching orders from the Commodore, Air Commodore. So
I keep on at him. It's all right. He's doing a couple for me, but I still want Banff because it was the home of one of the strike wings.
Mosquitoes.
It was mosquitoes and I think Beaufighters as well at various times, going after German shipping, etc.
Yeah, so it'd be Coastal Command stuff.
Coastal Command and also Bomber Command.
Got it.
At the end of the war, it all blurred. It was, at the end of the war, you did circuses and rhubarbs over on the continent, to be nuisances and take out, interdictory missions to take out transport and everything else. And also you were doing circuses and rhubarbs to try and get German fighters up and shoot them down.
Got it. Yeah. Interesting stuff. God, I could talk about just that stuff all night, but we won't do that to you folks. But we do appreciate you watching. We'll be back next Thursday, again at 7 p.m. Eastern, at midnight to you folks over there in England. And we do appreciate you staying up, Chris, just to visit with everyone. Any final parting words for the night?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've agreed that when you actually come over next year, we're going to try and do a live one.
Yes, yeah, we were talking about that tonight. We're going to be over there. We're going to do this from England and broadcast this to everyone back there and kind of share.
I'm not sure where we'll do it, but we'll do it from a haunted building or a haunted airfield, and we'll do a live one.
Excellent. That's so stay with us. We've got so many things planned, folks. Not to mention the different shows that we want to talk about. You saw kind of how we meandered off a little bit of the game plan tonight, but that's what we do. We talk about what's on our mind at any given time. But it also shows you all the great topics that we want to share with you and get your thoughts on. So as always, like, subscribe, be part of this. This is a program for all of us. And I guess with that, we will bid you adieu until next week. I do want to say, Ike, I want to see your beer of the week. And I'm going to challenge you, Chris. I want to see something next week. Let's chat about something since you're going to tease me about my Alamorada. Say what?
This is like the
what,
ice
Ryan?
bucket challenge. I challenge you to give me a better beer, and I challenge you to find a better beer.
I can find lots and lots of better beers.
Okay.
But the trouble is, you can't get them over there.
At any rate, folks, appreciate you watching tonight. We will see you next Thursday. Once again, share, get the word out. Let's spread the word. This is how we solve the problem. This is how we find the answers, working together, talking, sharing. So with that, good night. We'll see you on the other side. See you next week. Good night, all.